Okay. Yeah, let's go.
Their committee meeting is
You want to start?
Want me to start?
Yeah, you start.
Okay. All right. Hey, thank you. Appreciate everybody coming. We've got another opportunity before us to witness this pattern that's starting to develop. We have a House Study Bill 169 and Senate Study Bill 1170 that have miraculously appeared out of, I don't know, thin air. I think all of us are adults in the room, and we realize that it's not really magic. There are actually secret committees out putting together bills without any input from many of the people in this room, maybe any of the people in this room. As of December in 2016, there were 1,650,000 Iowans who worked in this state. The bill that we're talking about here addresses workers' compensation system in Iowa and radically alters how that program works in this state. It's regrettable that we continue to see the pattern that has developed play out here where dark money interests are getting their say in the process far before the time when any of the rest of us in the state even get to see the bill. So we expect these legislative proposals to be acted on shortly this week. We will likely see committee meetings, subcommittee meetings, and action before the final date on this Friday. As to the details of this, I'd like to introduce Jay Smith. He's the attorney for the Iowa Federation of Labor with Smith and McElwain. Jay, if you would add a little detail.
Thank you, Ken. As Ken said, our office is counsel for the Iowa Federation of Labor. We're also counsel for many other labor unions in this state. Most importantly, we're counsel for many injured workers throughout the state of Iowa and have been over the years since our inception. We're here today because yesterday afternoon, the House, Representative County, and the Commerce Committee introduced House Study Bill 169. This morning, a Senate counterpart bill, which is exactly the same, was introduced into the Senate. Before we get into what's in the bill, I want to remind everybody here today why we have workers' compensation statutes. Prior to 1911, if you got injured on the job, you go out and sue your employer. 1911, the business community and labor decided that, look, that's not a good system. Workers deserve a social safety net, and it was cheaper for employers. And so that's how we got workers' compensation statutes. The Iowa system, as it is constituted today, works. I'm aware of no studies that suggest the Iowa workers' compensation system is broken or in need of repair. In this regard, I went to the Iowa Association of Business and Industry website this morning, looked at their history. Their website, they note that they helped, their predecessor helped pass Iowa's workers' compensation statute, and then they say, and I quote, "Key provisions of the law have been nationally recognized for making Iowa's workers' compensation one of the nation's most cost-effective and efficient laws." Nonetheless, House Study Bill 169 seeks to gut the system that we have in Iowa. And it's another in a long line, unfortunately, of bills introduced during this legislative session that attacks workers here in Iowa. A report from the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics that came out in December shows that there's an increasing number of work-related injuries in Iowa, both in the public and private sector. And that exceeds the national average. And virtually all of the income distribution data shows that families, working families in Iowa and in this country, live paycheck to paycheck. That means on Friday, when you get paid, or Monday, or whatever day it is, you need that paycheck to pay the rent, to put food on the table, to clothe your children, buy gas to get to work. Yet House Study Bill 169 blatantly and callously cuts benefits to Iowa workers in multiple ways. Number one, it drastically reduces the benefits for common types of shoulder injuries, which many workers suffer due to repetitive motions as part of their job duties. It arbitrarily discriminates against older workers by requiring an older worker's age to come into play if the older worker is 67 years of age or older. And for Iowa workers who become permanently and totally disabled by a work injury, if you become injured prior to age 67, at 67 your benefits run out. You're 67 years or older, you get 150 weeks, regardless of how long you want to work. HSB 169 also reduces the liability and the employer's liability to provide benefits to injured workers on the job. It makes proving that you suffered a work-related injury more difficult, and it makes a mere positive drug or alcohol test grounds for an employer to deny benefits, regardless of whether or not alcohol or drugs played a part, in fact, of the injury. They didn't stop there. Goes further. And it tilts the claims procedure in favor of employers avoiding payment of benefits. Number one, changes the point at which injured workers have to report an injury or lose their right to claim benefits. Number two, if you're offered work, light duty work, and you don't think that you can do it due to your injury, you have to tell your employer in writing that it's not suitable, and if you don't do that, you lose benefits. It eliminates the 10%, current rate of 10% interest paid on weekly late benefits. It reduces that number. What's the practical effect of that? The practical effect of that is that if the employer decides that they're not going to pay benefits in a week, or they miss a week for whatever, and you don't have money to pay the rent, or you're late on your rent payment now and you're depending upon that check, there's no disincentive for the employers to continuously do that. Most important, if the employer doesn't like the decision of the commissioner and decides to appeal it to district court and on up the line, the injured worker can be without benefits during the term of the appeal. Again, you're week to week on your paycheck. You can't work because you're hurt. Who does that help? Finally, I want to talk about something that happened yesterday. Yesterday, the Republicans, as I understand it, there was a debate in the subcommittee about when life begins, conception. Okay, we're talking about that in the subcommittee. That got a lot of press attention yesterday and this morning. And as I understand the debate that occurred, they were talking about the sanctity of life. That we need to protect fetuses at conception because all life is sacred. Well, all life is sacred. And it doesn't start and stop at conception or birth. It extends to the ability of our citizens of this state to get a quality education, which the Republicans have already chosen that they're not going to fund. It extends to public servants who perform essential services for our state and local communities and who should be permitted to bargain like they had for 40 years, which the Republicans already overturned that statute. It extends to permitting local communities where we elect representatives in cities and counties to determine whether they want to have a higher minimum wage if need be, or to pass ordinances that protect people from discrimination, which isn't covered by state or federal law. It extends to providing a safe workplace for Iowa employees and ensuring that if employers violate the law, that they get fined so they don't do it in the future. And it extends to people who apply for unemployment benefits through no fault of their own and their ability to receive those benefits and to requalify for benefits. My friends, the sanctity of life, whenever it begins, doesn't stop at that end point. It extends through a person's entire life. And included in that is respect for the work that people do, respect for the sacrifices they make to their employer, the giving of their time. Now, I venture to guess that not all the Republicans in the legislature share some of those same sentiments with those in the majority when it comes to the sanctity of life and the value of work and the gutting of this Iowa workers' compensation statute that works. To those Republicans, I ask them to speak up, to stand up, to tell their colleagues that enough is enough, that they will not support a bill that attacks the most vulnerable of Iowans, those who are injured on the job. I ask them to do that because it's the right thing to do, but moreover, I ask them to do that because denying Iowa's injured workers the benefits that they're entitled to under the current statute will inevitably result in more Iowans having to seek governmental assistance for health care, assistance for obtaining sustenance, and probably assistance through other safety social nets, which are already underfunded and overutilized. HSB 169 is simply another example of the Republican-controlled legislature and Governor Branstad's total and blatant disregard for the interests of ordinary Iowans, and the Republicans' pursuit of laws which solve no real problems and which clearly harm the most vulnerable of Iowa's employees. I thank everyone for being here today, and I urge you to talk to all of your representatives, whether you tweet them, Facebook, write a letter, show up at a forum, and urge them to vote against this bill that only does harm to workers who are already hurt on the job and don't deserve this attack.
The Workers' Compensation Advisory Committee has neither looked at this bill or, to my knowledge, been involved in the process. And it's interesting because that organization is made up of representatives from business, from labor, from the insurance industry, defense attorneys, claimant attorneys, agricultural representative, and medical representatives. And it's a little bit disturbing when the quote-unquote experts have no idea this is even coming. So it's another example of the smoke and mirrors that we've seen by Republican leadership in terms of their efforts to place many bills before us, getting, in this case, a law that has been on the books for more than 100 years.
Subcommittee meeting, both in the House and the Senate side, is taking place tomorrow. And does anybody have what time?
I don't have an answer for that. It's kind of unusual that a labor bill like this would go through Commerce. Theoretically, it could even go through judicial, but for whatever reasons, decisions were made by individuals to put it in the Commerce Committee.